The conference room went silent when Richard Ashford stood up, his $5,000 suit perfectly pressed, his face red with barely controlled rage. My colleagues from the marketing department were all there, 12 people who I'd worked with for 3 years, watching this disaster unfold in real time. "You think you're too good for this company now, Tyler?" Richard's voice echoed off the glass walls. "You think some startup in Seattle is going to appreciate you the way we do here?" I stood there holding my resignation letter, my hands steady even though my heart was pounding. Richard Ashford wasn't just the CEO of Ashford Industries, the third largest manufacturing company in Chicago. He was also my father-in-law, married to my wife Emma for 4 years, and he'd made it clear from day one that I'd never be good enough for his daughter. "I'm grateful for the opportunity you gave me here," I said, keeping my voice level. "But I need to take my career in a different direction." Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. He walked around the conference table until he was standing right in front of me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the scotch he'd probably had at lunch. "A different direction," he repeated, looking around at my colleagues. "Did you all hear that? Tyler here thinks he needs a different direction. After I gave him this job, after I promoted him twice, after I let him marry my daughter despite the fact that he came from nothing." Sarah Mitchell from accounts was staring at her laptop. James Park was pretending to check his phone. Nobody wanted to meet my eyes because they all knew what was coming. They'd all seen Richard humiliate people before. "Sir, I appreciate everything you've done," I started, but Richard cut me off with a wave of his hand. "You appreciate nothing," he said. "You know what you are, Tyler? You're a project. Emma felt sorry for you when you were working that dead-end job at the print shop. Making what, $35,000 a year? She thought she could fix you, make you into something respectable, and I went along with it because I love my daughter, and I wanted to make her happy." My face was burning now, but I kept my expression neutral. This was exactly why I needed to leave. 4 years of this kind of treatment, 4 years of being reminded that I wasn't born into money, that I didn't go to the right schools, that my father worked construction instead of running a corporation. "But here's what's going to happen," Richard continued, his voice getting louder. "You're going to walk out of here thinking you're hot stuff because some tech company in Seattle offered you $75,000 a year. You're going to move to that rainy hellhole and realize that you don't know anybody, that you're nobody without the Ashford name behind you. And then, in about a month, maybe 6 weeks if you're particularly stubborn, you're going to come crawling back here begging for your job." He leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. "And when you do, I'm going to laugh in your face and tell you no. Because, Tyler, you're nothing. You've always been nothing, and you'll always be nothing." The conference room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. I looked at Richard Ashford, this man who'd spent 4 years trying to break me down, who'd criticized every decision I made, who'd made it clear at every family dinner and company event that I wasn't worthy of his daughter or his company. "Start counting," I said. Richard frowned. "What?" "You said 1 month. I'm telling you to start counting, because I'm not coming back. Not in a month, not in 6 weeks, not ever. I'm going to Seattle. I'm going to build a career on my own terms, and I'm going to prove to myself and to Emma that I don't need the Ashford name to be successful." I handed him my resignation letter, turned around, and walked out of that conference room with my head held high behind me. I could hear Richard starting to shout, but I didn't turn around. I kept walking through the office, past the cubicles where I'd spent 3 years of my life, past the break room where I'd eaten countless lunches, and straight out the front door. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. Emma's name flashed on the screen, but I didn't answer. I couldn't deal with that conversation yet, not when I was still shaking with adrenaline and anger. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or undervalued, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button and leave a comment below telling me about a time when someone doubted you and how you proved them wrong. Your story matters, and I want to hear it. Now, let's continue with what happened next. The drive home took 30 minutes. 30 minutes of my phone buzzing constantly with calls and texts. Emma, Richard, my mother-in-law Patricia, even my colleague Sarah. Everyone wanted to weigh in on what I'd just done, but I needed time to think before I talked to anyone. Emma was waiting in our apartment when I got home. We'd been renting a 2-bedroom place in Lincoln Park. Nice, but not extravagant. The kind of place a marketing manager at a mid-sized company could afford. Emma had insisted on keeping our living situation modest, despite the fact that her father could have bought us a house with pocket change. She said it was important that we build our life together on our own terms. Now, looking at her face red from crying, mascara streaked down her cheeks, I wondered if she'd actually meant any of that. "Tyler," she said the moment I walked through the door, "what the hell did you just do?" I set my keys on the counter and loosened my tie. "I quit my job. You know that. We talked about the Seattle offer last week." "We talked about it as a possibility," Emma said, her voice rising. "Not as something you were actually going to do, and you didn't tell me you were going to humiliate my father in front of the entire marketing department." I turned to look at her, really look at her. Emma Ashford was beautiful, no question about that. Blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of face that made people turn around for a second glance. But right now, all I saw was her father's daughter. "Humiliate him?" I said. "Emma, did your father call you and tell you what happened in that conference room?" "He told me you quit in the middle of a meeting and made a scene." "That's not what happened. Your father called me into a conference room with my entire team present and spent 10 minutes tearing me apart, telling everyone that I'm nothing without the Ashford name, that you married me as some kind of charity project." Emma looked away. "He was upset. You blindsided him with this resignation." "I gave 2 weeks' notice, Emma. That's standard practice. And even if I hadn't, that doesn't give him the right to humiliate me in front of my colleagues." She was quiet for a moment, then looked back at me with tears in her eyes. "So what now? You're just going to move to Seattle and leave me here?" "I'm hoping you'll come with me," I said. "That was always the plan, remember? We talked about this being a fresh start for both of us." "Tyler, I can't just leave Chicago. My family is here, my friends, my entire life." "Your father is here," I corrected. "And that's the problem. We can't build a life together as long as we're living in his shadow." Emma shook her head, fresh tears starting to fall. "You don't understand. You've never understood what it's like to be part of a family like mine. There are expectations, responsibilities. I understand that your father has spent 4 years treating me like I'm beneath you. I understand that every time we go to your parents' house for dinner, he finds some way to remind me that I didn't grow up with money. I understand that he's made it clear I'm not good enough for you. He just wants the best for me." "No, Emma, he wants control. And he's using you to try to control me." "Well, I'm done. I'm taking this job in Seattle, and I'm going to prove to myself and to him that I can succeed without his help." Emma was crying harder now. "And what about us? What about our marriage?" I walked over to her and took her hands in mine. "Come with me. We'll start over in Seattle. No more Richard telling us how to live our lives. No more feeling like I have to prove myself every single day. Just us, building something together." She pulled her hands away. "I need time to think." That conversation was 3 weeks ago. Emma decided to stay in Chicago while I moved to Seattle to start my new job at Horizon Technologies, a rapidly growing software company that had offered me a position as Director of Marketing Strategy at $130,000 a year, nearly triple what I'd been making at Ashford Industries. The first week was brutal. New city, new job, new apartment that echoed with emptiness every night when I came home. I'd call Emma every evening, but our conversations were strained, awkward silences filling the spaces between words. She was still living in our old apartment, still working at the art gallery she loved, still having Sunday dinners with her parents. But the work was incredible. Horizon Technologies was everything Ashford Industries wasn't. Young, innovative, willing to take risks. My boss, Jennifer Walsh, actually listened to my ideas instead of dismissing them out of hand. Within 2 weeks, I'd presented a complete marketing overhaul that would shift the company's focus from B2B to direct consumer outreach. "This is brilliant," Jennifer said after my presentation to the executive team. "Tyler, where did you learn to think like this?" "Years of having my ideas shot down," I replied. "You learn to make them bulletproof." By the end of my first month in Seattle, I'd launched 3 major campaigns, hired a team of 5 talented marketers, and increased Horizon's social media engagement by 200%. Jennifer called me into her office on a Friday afternoon, exactly 31 days after I'd started. "Tyler, I'm going to be direct with you, she said. We're opening a satellite office in Chicago to handle our Midwest expansion. I need someone to run it. Someone who understands both the tech world and traditional manufacturing. The position comes with a significant raise in equity in the company. Interested? My heart started racing. Back to Chicago, but on my own terms this time. What's the timeline? We're announcing it next week. The office opens in 60 days. I know you just moved here, so I understand if this feels like whiplash, but you're the right person for this role. I'll do it, I said without hesitation. Jennifer smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. One more thing. We're hosting a regional conference in Chicago next month. All the major manufacturing companies will be there, including Ashford Industries. Richard Ashford is scheduled to give the keynote address. I want you there representing Horizon. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. I called Emma that night with the news. For the first time in weeks, she sounded genuinely happy. You're coming back to Chicago? Looks like it. Not right away, but within 2 months. And Emma, I need you to understand something. This isn't me coming back defeated. This is me coming back successful. On my own terms. I know that, she said quietly. Tyler, I'm sorry about how I reacted when you left. I've had a lot of time to think, and you were right. My father has too much control over our lives. I've been applying to galleries in Seattle. You have? I should have come with you from the start. I was scared, I guess. Scared of disappointing my parents. Scared of leaving everything familiar. But being apart from you these past few weeks has been worse than any of that. We talked for 2 hours. That night, really talked for the first time since I'd left Chicago. Emma told me about the conversations she'd been having with her mother, about how Patricia had actually taken her side when she'd mentioned moving to Seattle. Apparently Richard had been impossible to live with since I'd left, taking his anger out on everyone around him. He keeps saying you'll fail, Emma said, that you'll realize you made a mistake and come crawling back. He's going to be disappointed, I replied. The conference was held at the Palmer House Hotel, one of Chicago's most prestigious venues. Horizon Technologies had purchased a premium sponsor package, which meant our logo was everywhere, and I had access to all the executive networking events. I arrived early on the first day, wearing a suit that actually fit me properly, paid for with my own money instead of borrowed from Richard's tailor. The exhibition hall was massive, hundreds of companies showcasing their products and services, thousands of professionals moving through the crowds making connections and deals. Tyler Brennan? A voice behind me made me turn around. It was James Park, my former colleague from Ashford Industries. I heard you were out in Seattle. What are you doing back? Working, I said simply. I'm with Horizon Technologies now. We're opening a Chicago office. James's eyes widened. Horizon? They're huge. Everyone in the industry is talking about their new marketing campaigns. Wait, that's your work? Some of it. Team effort, really. We talked for a few minutes, and I learned that things at Ashford Industries had gotten worse since I'd left. Richard had become increasingly difficult, micromanaging every decision, refusing to adapt to new market realities. The company was losing ground to competitors who were more willing to innovate. He mentions you sometimes, James said carefully. Usually when he's talking about loyalty and commitment. I think he expected you to fail and come back. The fact that you haven't seems to really bother him. Good, I said. The keynote address was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the Grand Ballroom. I found a seat near the back, not wanting to make my presence too obvious. The room filled up quickly, hundreds of industry professionals coming to hear what Richard Ashford had to say about the future of manufacturing. He walked onto the stage looking every bit the successful CEO, his presence commanding immediate attention. The speech started well enough, discussing market trends and innovation, but about 15 minutes in, something shifted. There's a disease in corporate America, Richard said, his voice taking on that familiar edge I knew so well. A disease of disloyalty, of young professionals who think they know better than the people who built this industry. They take the training we give them, the opportunities we provide, and then they walk away thinking they can do better elsewhere. Several people in the audience shifted, uncomfortably. This wasn't the inspirational message they'd come to hear. I've seen it in my own company, Richard continued. People I personally promoted, people I brought into my family, turning their backs on everything I offered them. And where are they now? Working for fly-by-night tech companies that will be gone in 5 years, making promises they can't keep. That's when I stood up, not to leave, but to be seen. Richard's eyes found me in the crowd, and for just a moment his carefully practiced speech faltered. "But the market has a way of correcting these mistakes," he said, recovering quickly. "These disloyal employees will learn that success isn't just about flashy job titles and inflated salaries. It's about staying power, about building something that lasts." The speech ended to polite but noticeably lukewarm applause. People were talking among themselves, and I could tell the message hadn't landed the way Richard had hoped. As the crowd filed out of the ballroom, I made my way toward the front. Richard saw me coming. He was standing with a group of other CEOs, but he excused himself and walked over to meet me. Up close, I could see the strain on his face. He looked older than he had a month ago, more tired. "Tyler," he said, his voice tight, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Horizon Technologies is a major sponsor," I replied. "I'm representing the company at the executive events." "Right. Your little tech startup. How's that working out for you?" "Really well, actually. We're opening a Chicago office. I'll be running it." Richard's jaw clenched. "You're coming back to Chicago." "Looks that way. Not that I ever really left. Emma's here, and she's been keeping me updated on how things are going at Ashford Industries." "Sounds like you've been having some challenges." "Every company faces challenges. That's part of business." "True. But some companies adapt, and some companies insist on doing things the way they've always been done. I heard you lost the Meridian contract last week. That's got to sting." Richard's face went red. "Who told you that?" "Word gets around. Meridian went with a competitor who offered them a more innovative approach to their supply chain management. Funny thing is, I pitched a similar approach to you about 18 months ago. You told me I didn't understand how real business worked. I don't have to stand here and listen to this." "No, you don't. But here's what I wanted to tell you. Remember when you said I'd come crawling back in a month? Well, it's been 5 weeks. I'm not crawling, Richard. I'm walking. Walking into a career that values innovation over ego, into a company that rewards talent instead of punishing it, into a life where I don't have to prove myself to you or anyone else every single day." Richard opened his mouth to respond, but a man in an expensive suit appeared at his elbow. "Richard, we need you for the panel discussion in 10 minutes. "I'll be right there," Richard said, not taking his eyes off me. When the man walked away, Richard leaned in close. "You think you've won something here, Tyler? You think one successful month means anything?" "No. I think 4 years of putting up with your contempt means everything. I think finally having the courage to walk away from a toxic situation means everything. I think proving to myself that I can succeed without your approval means everything." Richard started to say something else, but Jennifer Walsh appeared at my side. "Tyler, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." She turned to Richard with a professional smile. "Richard Ashford, I'm Jennifer Walsh, CEO of Horizon Technologies. Your keynote was interesting, though I have to say I disagree with your perspective on employee loyalty. In my experience, the best employees are the ones who aren't afraid to seek out opportunities where their talents are truly valued." Richard's expression went from angry to carefully neutral. "Ms. Walsh, I've heard about Horizon Technologies. You've certainly made some waves in the industry." "We prefer to think of it as making progress," Jennifer said smoothly. "Tyler here has been instrumental in our growth. His marketing strategies have exceeded every expectation we had. We're very lucky to have him on our team." "I'm sure you are," Richard said stiffly. "In fact, I was hoping you and I might have a conversation about potential collaboration opportunities. Horizon is always looking for manufacturing partners, and from what I understand, Ashford Industries has significant capacity. Perhaps we could discuss how our two companies might work together." I watched Richard's face as he processed this. Jennifer was offering him a business opportunity, a chance to partner with one of the fastest-growing companies in the tech sector. But accepting would mean acknowledging that I, the son-in-law he'd dismissed as nothing, had brought real value to an organization he now needed to impress. "I'd be happy to discuss that," Richard finally said. "Have your people contact my assistant to set up a meeting." "Wonderful," Jennifer said. "Tyler will be our point person on the project, of course. He'll be running our Chicago office, so he'll be handling all our Midwest partnerships." The look on Richard's face was worth every humiliating moment he'd put me through over the past 4 years. After Richard excused himself and walked away, Jennifer turned to me with a knowing smile. That's your father-in-law? Unfortunately, yes. How much of that conversation did you hear? Enough to understand why you were so eager to leave your last position. Tyler, I want you to know something. I offered you this job because you're talented, not because I felt sorry for you. The work you've done at Horizon speaks for itself. Whatever that man made you believe about yourself, it wasn't true. Those words meant more to me than she could know. The conference ended late that evening, and I drove straight to my old apartment in Lincoln Park. Emma had texted me earlier saying she wanted to see me, that we needed to talk. I was nervous, not sure what to expect after 5 weeks apart. She opened the door before I could even knock, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Then she was in my arms, holding me tight, and I realized how much I'd missed her. "I'm sorry," she whispered against my chest. "I'm so sorry I didn't support you from the beginning." "I know. It's okay." "No, it's not okay. My father called me this afternoon. He was furious, going on and on about how you humiliated him at the conference, how you're working with some tech CEO to steal his clients. Tyler, I've never heard him like that before. He was scared." I pulled back to look at her face. "Scared?" "Of you. Of what you've accomplished. Of the fact that you don't need him anymore, and everyone in the industry knows it." We spent the rest of the evening talking. Really talking. For the first time since this whole thing started. Emma told me about the pressure her father had been putting on her to convince me to come back to Ashford Industries, about the arguments they'd had when she'd refused. She'd finally told Richard that she was moving to Seattle to be with me, and that if he wanted to be part of our lives going forward, he needed to start treating me with respect. "What did he say?" I asked. "He said I was making a mistake, that I was choosing you over my family." "And what did you say?" Emma smiled. "I told him you are my family, and that if he couldn't see what an incredible person you are, that was his loss, not mine." 3 months later, we were settled into a new apartment in Chicago's West Loop, close to Horizon's new office headquarters. Emma had started working at a contemporary art gallery that gave her creative freedom she'd never had at her previous job. We were building the life we'd always talked about, on our own terms. Richard and I had settled into a professional working relationship. Ashford Industries did end up partnering with Horizon Technologies on several projects, and while Richard would never admit it out loud, I knew he respected the work I was doing. The humiliation he'd inflicted in that conference room had backfired spectacularly, pushing me toward a success I might never have achieved if I'd stayed comfortable and complacent. Patricia, my mother-in-law, had become an unexpected ally. She'd apologized privately for not standing up to Richard sooner, admitting that she'd watched him tear down too many people over the years in the name of protecting the family business. She'd started pushing him to retire, to let the next generation take over Ashford Industries before his outdated management style destroyed everything he'd built. The monthly family dinners were still awkward, but they were manageable. Richard would occasionally slip back into his old habits, making subtle digs about my background or questioning my business decisions. But now when he did, Emma would shut him down immediately. And honestly, his words didn't have the same power anymore. I didn't need his approval. 6 months after I'd walked out of that conference room, Richard called me into his office at Ashford Industries. It was the first time I'd been back in the building since I'd quit. "Tyler," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down." I sat, curious about why he'd asked me here. Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring at some papers on his desk. Finally, he looked up at me. "I owe you an apology." I almost fell out of my chair. "What?" "I said I owe you an apology. For the things I said in that conference room, for the way I treated you over the years, I was wrong." This had to be some kind of trick. Richard Ashford didn't apologize. "What brought this on?" "Patricia," he admitted. "She's been on me for months about the way I treated you. But more than that, watching what you've accomplished at Horizon, seeing how the industry respects you, I realized I let my own ego get in the way of recognizing talent when it was right in front of me." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "I'm not good at this," Richard continued, "admitting I was wrong. But the truth is, you've been good for Emma. You've pushed her to be more independent, to think for herself. And you've certainly proven that you didn't need the Ashford name to be successful." "No, I didn't. But I learned a lot working here, Richard. Even if the environment was difficult, I learned how to be resilient, how to stand up for myself, how to recognize my own worth. So in a way, I should thank you. Richard smiled slightly. That's very diplomatic of you. I don't deserve it. We talked for another hour, clearing the air about years of resentment and misunderstanding. Richard would never be the warm, supportive father-in-law I might have wanted, but we reached an understanding. He would respect my choices and my career, and I would acknowledge the role Ashford Industries had played in my professional development. As I was leaving, Richard said one last thing. For what it's worth, Tyler, I'm glad you didn't come crawling back. You proved me wrong, and I needed to be proven wrong. Start counting, you said. Well, I did. And somewhere around day 45, I realized you weren't coming back, that you'd actually meant what you said. It was humbling. I extended my hand, and after a moment, Richard shook it. Driving home that evening, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A month ago, I'd been humiliated in front of my colleagues, dismissed as nothing by a man who was supposed to be family. Today, I was running a successful office for a growing company, had tripled my salary, and had earned the respect of the very man who'd tried to break me. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't proving someone wrong through words. It was proving them wrong through actions, through building something real and lasting that had nothing to do with their approval or their name. Emma was cooking dinner when I got home, something she'd been doing more often now that her work schedule was more flexible. How did it go with my dad? She asked. Surprisingly well. He actually apologized. Emma dropped the spoon she'd been holding. He what? I told her about the conversation, about the apology, and the understanding we'd reached. Emma listened with tears in her eyes. I'm proud of you, she said when I finished. Not just for succeeding, but for having the grace to accept his apology. A lot of people wouldn't have. He's your father, I said, and he's trying. That's more than a lot of people get. That night, lying in bed next to my wife in our apartment that we'd chosen together, paid for with money I'd earned on my own merit, I realized something important. Richard's ultimatum, meant to break me down and force me to accept my place, had actually set me free. By betting that I'd fail, by counting on me to come crawling back, he'd given me the motivation to prove not just him wrong, but to prove to myself what I was truly capable of. Start counting, I'd told him that day in the conference room. And now, 6 months later, the count was in. Not a count of days until I failed, but a count of successes, of barriers broken, of limitations overcome. Richard Ashford had been wrong about me. But more importantly, I'd been wrong about myself. I'd accepted his version of my worth for too long, let his contempt define how I saw my own potential. Walking away from that, refusing to let his opinion matter more than my own belief in myself, had been the hardest and best decision I'd ever made. The job at Horizon Technologies continued to exceed my expectations. Within a year, I'd built the Chicago office into one of the company's most profitable divisions, securing partnerships with major manufacturers across the Midwest. Jennifer promoted me to VP of Strategic Partnerships, giving me equity in the company and a seat at the executive table. Richard and I never became close, but we developed a mutual respect. Ashford Industries became one of Horizon's key manufacturing partners, and Richard would occasionally ask for my input on modernizing their operations. He even admitted, in a rare moment of vulnerability, that he wished he'd listened to some of my ideas years ago when I'd first proposed them. The story of that conference room confrontation spread through the industry, becoming a cautionary tale about the cost of underestimating people. I heard variations of it at networking events, each version getting more dramatic in the retelling. Some people made me out to be a hero, others painted Richard as a villain, but the truth was more complicated than either narrative. Richard was a product of his generation, a man who believed in loyalty to companies over personal growth, who saw ambition in younger employees as a threat rather than an asset. He was wrong, but he wasn't evil. And I was right to leave, but I also carried my own insecurities that made me too willing to accept his version of my worth for too long. If I could go back and talk to the version of myself who walked into that conference room 5 weeks after quitting, I'd tell him that the hardest part wasn't leaving. It was believing that he deserved better, that his worth wasn't determined by Richard Ashford's opinion or the Ashford family name, that success measured in his own terms was more valuable than comfort measured in someone else's. Start counting, I'd said, and I did count. Every day that I built something on my own merit. Every time I made a decision based on what I believed was right, rather than what would please Richard. Every moment I chose self-respect over approval. The count is still going, and it always will be. Because proving yourself isn't a destination you reach and then stop. It's a continuous journey of choosing yourself, your values, your vision, over and over again. Richard Ashford gave me an ultimatum that day, but what he really gave me was permission to stop seeking his approval. And that, ironically, was the greatest gift he could have given me. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt underestimated or had to fight for respect from people who should have given it freely, please leave a comment below sharing your experience. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about resilience, redemption, and proving yourself when the odds seem impossible. And remember, when someone tells you that you'll fail, when they're counting on you to come crawling back, sometimes the best response is simply this: start counting.